Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar, 7 Ways to Accelerate Your Enterprise Journey to the Cloud, presented by Amazon Web Services. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. My name is Kareem. I'm a solution architect at Amazon. I've been there for 2 years, and I'm based in the Singapore office. Joining me actually today is Alex. Alex will be on the line to answer any questions you have as we go. So if you do have any questions, do just type them into the webinar chat window there through the console client. Okay, so we're going to be doing something a little bit different today, and this is the first session that's really not going to be too technical. In fact, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how you can adopt cloud computing in your organization and some of the best ways to kick off cloud initiatives. So let's go through these quickly. These are the 3 things that you're going to learn. First of all, how you can benefit from driving cloud initiatives. The second thing is the 7 proven steps to accelerate cloud adoption in large enterprises. And third, how we can help you reach your objectives faster. So to start with, I just want to talk quickly about the types of enterprise customers that are using the AWS platform today. And we have amazing customers doing amazing things with our platform. So first of all, you might look at somebody like Pfizer, a large pharmaceutical company. They're actually using AWS for high-performance computing, and their use case has them doing large-scale data analytics for their research projects, for clinical analytics, and modeling. And one of the benefits of that is they can access vast amounts of scale on our platform at a very, very low cost, much lower than they could on-premise. Another great example is Major League Baseball in America. So the broadcast division of that company is actually using AWS to process 17 petabytes of data from their baseball games each season. Channel 4 is a major broadcaster in the UK, and they're using AWS to do data analytics of their video on demand platform. And they're using that data actually to drive advertising and targeted advertising among their client base. A couple more examples. Kellogg's, a major manufacturer of FMCG products, they're actually using AWS SAP to optimize their trade spends, and in the process is saving nearly $1 million a year. As well as that, we have a bunch of startup companies that many of you are probably familiar with. Companies like Flipboard, Airbnb, Spotify, Supercell, the makers of the game Clash of Clans, and Rovio, of course, the makers of Angry Birds. These are just some of the customers that are using the platform today. So what I'd like to do now is, we've talked a lot about businesses using AWS, but cloud is as much a business opportunity as it is an opportunity for you as an individual. I think this is really important to understand. Today we're living in rapidly changing times. And in fact, change is accelerating very, very quickly. There's a number of analysts out there who currently estimate that between 40 and 75% of the current Fortune 500 companies will be replaced by 2025. That's just in 10 years' time. And these will be replaced by startups and other high-growth businesses. So if you look at that statistic, you realize the rate of change in industry. Now, if you look at cloud, cloud is offering a massive amount of opportunity in business. It's driving business agility. And cloud is actually becoming the new normal. As a result of that, cloud experience is in very high demand. So this figure from IDC says that by this year, 14 million new jobs will be created around cloud computing. And in fact, 2 million of them alone will be created in India. What's interesting about this figure is that Amazon, we still feel we're at day 1 in terms of cloud adoption. So there's a long road ahead of us, and there's a lot more growth. And this is much bigger than just virtualization. It's in fact the biggest change in IT in probably your lifetime. And now you guys have the opportunity to be at the forefront of that, and you can become cloud leaders in your organization. So maybe you've had this question before from an executive, and I think this is really important. So what is cloud computing? And some people might describe cloud computing by its software as a service, its platform as a service, its infrastructure as a service. And while those descriptions or definitions are not inaccurate, a much better way to describe cloud is by the 6 benefits that it offers. And these 6 benefits are only available in the cloud. So the number 1 benefit for enterprises, and again, particularly if you're speaking to executives or business audiences, is the ability to increase business agility, increase speed. So whether that's through rapid provisioning or provisioning platform services that get you up and running very quickly, this is something that's very important to business. One of the other important aspects is cost. And as a cloud provider, we offer massive economies of scale that allow us to continually reduce prices for customers. And to date, we've reduced prices over 46 times. But the other thing that enterprises, like the ones I talked about before, like about AWS and the cloud, is that it allows them to focus on their core business and not worry about running data centers and infrastructure. And I think this is a really important point. The other element is that you're trading capital expense for variable expense. And in simple terms, this means you pay for what you use when you use it. And this is a really unique thing that, again, when you're talking to business audiences, this allows them to focus on experimentation. And if you look back in IT over the last 20 or 30 years, experimentation is kind of seen to be somewhat of a risky and expensive thing because there's usually a large capital expense involved in that experimentation. And with cloud, because you pay as you go, even if you fail, the cost of that failure is much, much smaller than it would be if you were doing experiments on premise. So the ability to drive experimentation, and as we call it in the startup world, fail fast and fail cheap, actually unleashes a lot more innovation in businesses. And this is, again, a really important point to make when you're talking about cloud computing in enterprises. One of the other ones that I'll talk about briefly is capacity. So again, in the cloud, you've got access to infinitely scalable capacity. And one of the issues with on-premise environments is that sometimes capacity is constrained. And businesses can't move when they want to move because there's not enough data center rack space, there's not enough servers available, or environments are not available when businesses need them. So cloud takes this away and really gives you access to capacity on demand. The final one is the ability to go global. So every time that Amazon opens a new region, and we have regions across Asia Pacific, Europe, the Americas, customers automatically get access to those data center regions without signing any new contracts. So this is, again, a great way for businesses to adapt in this rapidly changing marketplace. They can launch new markets without really masses of upfront capital involved in building data centers in those countries. So we talked a bit about how you might describe cloud computing in a business sense. Now let's talk about the way that enterprises are actually adopting cloud. And there's 2 really common methods. First, there's the grassroots method. So this is the one on the right that I'll focus on. And this is where really benefits must be demonstrated and identified to your senior executive in your organization. So they're new to cloud and they want to understand what value it's bringing to the business. And these initiatives historically are driven by subject matter experts like developers and architects, system engineers, middle managers, whoever it may be. These are people who have an idea and feel that cloud is a great way to make this idea a reality. Most often they're taking a proof of concept approach. So they're drawing up a basic POC document and they're starting with a small footprint on the cloud and they're developing that out and creating a case to move that into production very rapidly. But importantly, when they do that, they're gathering data points that helps them establish a business case to management. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So the other one is the transformational approach. And in fact, grassroots actually typically would feed into a transformational initiative. And transformational initiatives really occur when the benefits are intuitive to the organization or there's an existing proof of value. So again, coming back to that grassroots approach where you've had successful POCs move into production and generate great business benefits. And again, transformational approaches are often driven by executive sponsors like CIOs and COOs, and they typically take a program approach. one of those things might be leading to an all-in, what we call an all-in in AWS, where customers will move their entire data center to AWS. And we have quite a number of examples of that. There's also examples of large-scale data center migration and consolidation, such as Dow Jones in the US. So these are the two approaches, but what's really important to understand here is that most organizations will start with a grassroots approach, which in turn will at some point may lead to a transformational agenda. So let's dive into this a little more deeply. So taking the transformational approach, what are the things that AWS can offer to help you put this into action? So AWS has a professional services team that's there to assist customers, to advise them and consult with them on how to adopt cloud computing. And they have a number of offerings. Now, one of them which we launched recently is the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework. So this is in fact a body of knowledge, not unlike TOGAF, Zachman, or other frameworks you might be familiar with. And the body of knowledge encompasses 7 domains or perspectives that cover different aspects of your IT operating model. The purpose of the framework is it's really a descriptive framework that allows you to make informed decisions about how you need to adapt your IT operating model for the cloud. Now, the cloud adoption methodology is actually more prescriptive, and it's implementation advice feeding into the cloud adoption framework. So these focus on methods, inputs, and outputs, SIPOC type diagrams, a lot of business process engineering. And so the cloud adoption methodology is a way for us to help you actually implement the cloud adoption framework. The final one I'll talk about briefly is Enterprise Accelerators. And these are offerings from professional services that are essentially a la carte. So you can choose to engage our professional services teams to work with you to develop a security playbook for your IT operations. So a security playbook may be a security framework that allows you to assess which workloads are the best fit from a security perspective to move into the cloud today. Other options could be things such as a value analysis, where you're producing a value-based assessment of workloads that you want to move into the cloud. So they're the 3, offerings that I wanted to talk about in the transformational approach. But really what today is about is talking about the grassroots approach. And this is really important. So let's talk about a scenario where you're starting from scratch today. And some of these steps that are outlined in the diagram here might seem obvious to some. But what I want to do is actually work through each of these steps and talk about some of the secret tips that we've learned from working with customers in the field over the last 8 years as they've adopted the cloud. Now, in many enterprises, work often begins with a business case. And with the cloud, things are actually a little bit different. Because with the cloud, there are things that you need to learn, and there's things that cloud will change about the way you operate, which you may not fully understand yet. So every organization is different, and so to understand the benefits of cloud and how you'd integrate cloud into your organization, the best way to do that is actually to experience it first. So let's walk through these steps. So the very first step would be to be the champion, and I'm really going to go into this in more detail in just a moment. After that, we want to identify a use case. We need to address security really early. We need to educate and train the key stakeholders. We can start a focus team, run a POC, and then once we've done that, we can create the business case and then evangelize the success of that. Now, the reason that we do this is because by experiencing the journey through a POC, we're actually going to learn a lot about what it takes to adopt cloud and adapt cloud for your organization. And over the coming slides, I'm really going to expand on this and talk about some of the key things you need to look out for. Okay, so the number one thing, or the first thing I should say, is be the champion. You know, I talked about at the beginning the opportunity that's there for individuals to step up and take a leadership position in this space. In all organizations, in all successful organizations that's adopted cloud computing, we've always had very strong champions. And these champions could be executive champions, but equally as important, they're champions working at the grassroots level. So architects, engineers, middle managers, whoever they may be. So let's talk about some of the things, some of the characteristics of what makes a really successful champion in an organization. And some of these are specific to cloud, and some of them are sort of more general attributes of a champion. So we've already identified that cloud changes a lot of things in your organization. So the first thing is champions have a strong sense of ownership and are willing to act on behalf of the company. They're knowledgeable and they fact-check peers when necessary. So there's going to be times when you're in meetings and people may say things about the cloud which are actually not true. The example I've given here is, but I heard cloud is less secure. Good champions can actually challenge peers on some of these things and actually reveal to them the facts behind the matter. They can also explain benefits of the cloud and why private cloud is not the answer. And I talked earlier about the 6 benefits of cloud computing. And you'll note that those benefits are actually unique to the public cloud, or what we call the cloud, versus the private cloud. Also, really successful champions act as connectors across organizational teams. So cloud touches many aspects of your organization, and therefore adoption requires a coordinated effort. And they make cloud a common goal, and they create an environment of teamwork and cohesion around that. And finally, and really importantly, they take a singular approach to adopting cloud. So too many approaches and stop-start initiatives can actually leave organizations without the confidence they need to actually adopt cloud. The best champions and leaders devise a singular approach, and they relentlessly execute on that approach and course correct when necessary. So that's the first one. The second one is they identify a use case, which I think is pretty obvious, right? But what are the best use cases to identify? Well, use cases are very organizational specific, but the best advice I can give you is you want to focus on use cases that make business teams really happy, and at the same time they accentuate the benefits of cloud. So one of the areas of this is digital initiatives. So digital, for those that don't know, encompasses a few different areas: social, mobile, analytics, and of course cloud computing. So if we look at the examples that I've given here, we have marketing websites, mobile apps, development, and data analytics. So in each of these examples, what we've done here is provided a business value description of what the cloud brings to the table. So if we look at something like marketing apps, actually the use case for marketing apps is excellent because it allows the marketing team to roll out new campaigns in minutes. And they're using a single, secure, and compliant platform. And they can track the costs of their campaigns more accurately. Plus, they can also scale up for any anticipated growth in that marketing campaign because they're paying only for what they use and when they use it. So this business value description is a great way to position, cloud computing use cases in your organization. And I've done some other examples here with mobile apps, development, and data analytics. So let's talk a little bit about data analytics. So running data analytics in the cloud is really a great use case because it allows organizations to perform additional analysis of existing data, and this can improve their decision making. So many companies are infrastructure constrained, and many of the jobs that they run, the process data that reaches their business decisions is constrained by the number of jobs that it can run. But in the cloud, you have access to infinitely scalable capacity. And so if you take the example of the cloud, what's really interesting is that you have the power of combining parallel computing with the pay-as-you-go model. And what I mean by this is if you have one server that runs for 1,000 hours, that is actually the same cost as 1,000 servers running for just 1 hour. So if you think about that for a moment, you actually can't replicate that in your on-premise environment. What you're doing is throwing more computing power at a piece of analytics, and you're reducing the time it takes to produce that analytics and that insight. So this is, again, something that's really unique in the cloud and one of the key value propositions, particularly when you're looking at doing big data and data analytics workloads in AWS. So let's move on to the third thing. The third thing, and this is really important, in that you need to address security early, and you need to help your organization perform their due diligence. And from my own experience, the very best way to do this is to identify an information security and compliance employee very early on the assessment of the use cases you've already identified. And this is really key. Engaging information security and compliance without use cases will not always lead to productive outcome. So the best thing to do is to identify those use cases first, then the InfoSec people have something to work with. They have something to assess. And once they've got those use cases, they can now understand how AWS security controls align to their own organization, to their own environment. So let's talk about the different roles and the resources available to help you do this assessment. So first of all, the champion and IT department in general, it's really important that customers understand the shared responsibility model. So the shared responsibility model is one that talks about what security responsibilities AWS has versus security responsibilities that the customer has. And so this is the very first thing that needs to be understood in the organization. And it's often a point of not concern, but misunderstanding among many people. The second one is information security employees. So InfoSec employees, there's three key resources. The first one is the AWS Security Overview document. This really talks about our controls in our data center environment. The second one is the AWS Security Best Practices White Paper. So this talks about how to architect your applications for high security in the AWS environment and the sorts of controls that one can put in place. The third one is security of the cloud. So this is a video from our Chief Information Security Officer, and he talks about broadly how AWS handles customer security. And really this video, although I put it in information security, is actually a great resource for everybody to look at, and it gives a great introduction into information security at Amazon. So compliance teams, we actually have a separate set of resources just for compliance, and there's three that I mentioned here. So the first one is the Risk and Compliance White Paper. This is really tailored for compliance audiences, and it talks about how we manage controls and auditors and accreditations that we have in our environment. The second one is compliance reports, and these are results of the accreditation and compliance program that we have underway, and I'll talk about that in just a second. The third one is compliance webinar. So the compliance webinar is something for compliance employees to sign up to, and they can get a really good introduction into how AWS manages compliance internally for our data center environment and our controls. So you'll note here that I've included two URLs, aws.amazon.com/security and /compliance. If you're an InfoSec member or a compliance team member, do definitely check out those resources. So security is actually our #1 priority, and as proof of that, we have a range of accreditations and certifications. These are some of the ones that you can see in front of you here. Things ranging from ISO 27001 to SOC 123 compliance, PSI, DSS, and a number of other specific compliance regimes. So if you're in healthcare, we have the HIPAA compliance program, and we are certified under that. So we really use this as one way to demonstrate to customers that we are undertaking our security due diligence properly, and we take security very seriously. So let's move on to the next one, education and training. So it's really important to engage and educate at the right time. And the approach I'd recommend you take here is that you first create awareness of AWS. And once you've done that and at the right time, you then invest in developing skills. So to create the awareness, the first thing is you want to engage all stakeholders who are involved in the IT purchasing process. And so this means not just necessarily IT folk, but also business teams. It could also be procurement and corporate finance, legal, and of course some of the IT teams, InfoSec, operations, and architecture. Each of these teams really need to understand how working with AWS is perhaps a little bit different to working with their existing on-premise data center environments. And so it's really important to engage them early in the process so that they can understand how things are different. The second thing is you want to use the right type of AWS technical training at the right time. So AWS offers a range of training. So first of all, there's a lot of free training available on our website that ranges from instructional videos to self-paced labs, and of course our YouTube channel, which has a bunch of videos from our global conference that happens in Las Vegas that covers things like architecture best practices and use cases for AWS. And there's a ton of content on there that's really, really interesting. So at what point do you use each of these training programs? So for the professional instructor-led training, it's better to use that once you've sort of started a project. Pre-project, you can work on building awareness using the resource I just talked about. The implementation phase, you can move into using some of the more advanced courses that we offer. So you have courses that span from system operations and developing on AWS using developer resources, and a number of other things that are more niche, like big data training, big data analytics. And these are role-based instructor-led training courses that happen in a classroom. Now, for general IT folk and business people, we have something called AWS Essentials, and Essentials is a one-day program that allows anyone really to come up to speed with what AWS offers and the benefits of cloud computing, but also the types of products that are available and solutions that are on offer. Now, after you've implemented the project, it's a good time to look at architecting on AWS, which is a program designed to do solution architecture using AWS resources, so building best practice architectures in the cloud. Likewise, we have a similar curriculum for DevOps and DevOps engineering. So anyone working in a CI/CD, rapid development environment, DevOps engineering on AWS is a really interesting program that can help you improve your developer productivity and also dramatically lower your development costs. After the project, it's always great to get certified. So we also offer certification exams through our global partner Criterion. And we also have a number of practice exams available online. So you can go into the exam with confidence that you know pretty much all the answers before going in there and paying for your exam. So we've talked a bit about education and training. Let's talk now about starting a focus team. So what is a focus team? A focus team is a virtual team or a cloud enablement team that's cross-functional and multidisciplinary. And they're there actually to drive faster outcomes. So the last thing you want to do is build a team that actually slows down the process. This team is actually there to help you drive initiatives in the organization. So I've outlined a few of the example functions in the left here, and let me just walk through them really quickly. So this team, as I said, is cross-functional. It could consist of the champion, representatives from architecture, infrastructure, procurement, InfoSec, service management, application portfolio, whoever you feel is a key stakeholder that needs to be part of the decision-making process, who can actively contribute to driving outcomes within this team. So some of the functions include assessing what are good use cases for cloud. How do we integrate operationally our systems, our processes, our people into the cloud model? Likewise, what training do we need to put in place to have them ready to adopt cloud computing? And then finally, how do we define and govern standards for cloud? So these are just some of the functions that I would recommend this type of team perform. And we have a number of best practices as well that we'd like to share with you around these teams. And the first thing is, when you create any virtual team, it's great to have a charter. And the charter really defines the purpose and objectives of the team. And that those best teams really have objectives that are measurable, or they follow the SMART model. The second thing is, for these teams to be effective, they need to have an executive sponsor with authority. And the best executive sponsors to have are the ones that are CIO level, CMO level. It really depends on who is the right sponsor for your cause. So if you have a series of IT infrastructure initiatives, then perhaps it's the CIO. The other thing we've learned in working with these teams is that you really want to keep the team small and functional. So 8 or less people if possible. And if you follow Amazon in any way, you might be familiar with this term we have called 2 pizza teams. And the concept is you want the team no bigger than you can feed with just 2 pizzas. And the rule of thumb around 2 pizzas is, more or less 10 people or less, but ideally 6. So really think about keeping the team as small as possible so it's functional and it's agile, because the team is there to actually get the initiatives going. It's not there to slow things down. One of the ways that you can actually drive contribution amongst the team members is to align their individual KPIs to the team charter. So this is a great way to make sure that everybody on the team is driving towards a common goal. And you also want to be smart about who you choose to have on the team. The final thing I'd say is that given the remit of a team like this, it's also really valuable to have some level of budget authority or budget approval, because there may be projects, there may be organizational initiatives that you would like to kick off, and these will require funding. So getting budget authority is another best practice for these types of teams. So you've got the team in place. The next step is you run a POC. And I really have just two pieces of advice to share with you here. The first thing is you don't want to boil the ocean. What I mean by that, you want to keep it as simple as possible. If you want to do something more complex, sometimes it's good to multi-phase the POC. So you start with phase one of the POC, and then you layer the complexity through different POC phases. But really important when you're running POC are these two things. First is that you want to define meaningful success criteria. They're actually linked back to business outcomes. And the second thing is you really need to document lessons learned as you go. So I talked earlier about how cloud is going to change some aspects of the way you operate today. When you're experiencing the POC and running your tests, you're really getting a really good feel for perhaps what things need to change. So to give you some examples here, we've talked about what are the business processes that need to be changed or improved? What are the skill or role gaps that we have today? What technology standards might need to be reviewed? And how do my individual's responsibilities change when we adopt cloud? So these are just example questions. They're not necessarily the questions that you may have as you go along. But by running the POC, we'll reveal this level of detail to you because you're going through a discovery process. On the success criteria area, there's really a few examples here. So I've talked about environment provisioning time as a potential success criteria. How long does it take to get a development environment online in the cloud? Likewise, if I'm running an analytics job and the job today takes 9 days to process, but by moving it to the cloud it takes 3 hours, then of course that's something that you want to capture. Another really common one is if you're running a web or mobile application, might be around the number of concurrent users, maximum concurrent users you can have on your website in a given performance metric or profile. So these are some really common ones, but of course these are going to be very specific to the workload or use case that you choose. So the key message here is really to keep it as simple as possible and to link it back to business outcomes as much as possible, and at the same time collecting lessons learned as you go. So we've run the POC. What's next? So the next thing, of course, is to create the business case. So let me just talk you through this really quickly. In the center, you've got your business case, and on the left and right, we have inputs into the business case. The left-hand side focuses specifically on the use case. The right-hand side talks more generally about the benefits of AWS and cloud computing. But by combining these two things, you really have a holistic and accurate business case. Let's talk through a few of these really quickly. So on the left-hand side, you have the use case POC results. And again, these will be things such as the success criteria, whether they were met or not, and what the general recommendation was on the solution. By running the POC, you also now have a very accurate cost model. So you know exactly how much it's going to cost to run when you run it on AWS, because you can see at the end of the month what the bill is for those resources. At the same time, you've collected a business value description, but also because you've collected those lessons learned along the way, you've actually got now a recommended approach. So perhaps in the first iteration of the POC, there were things that were not great. And so you found some improvements and you iterated on that. You've collected that knowledge, and you can now take that and form a recommended approach, which is going to put forward a very strong solution to the business. The other thing we see commonly in business cases is InfoSec or compliance assessments if they're needed or necessary. So these are other things that are really important in the business case. Now, the right-hand side, we have a few things, right? We have the 6 benefits of cloud in business terms. We have things like industry research, which can often help you bolster a case for moving into the cloud. So I've used the example here of Gartner. You may also want to include relevant industry case studies. So if you're from a manufacturing industry or from a pharmaceutical industry, then you want to go to the AWS website and look at pharmaceutical and other industry case studies that are relevant to you and your business. Finally, you want to talk about the AWS platform and its breadth. And really, platform breadth is really a key enabler for enterprises. This is not going to be just a one-time thing. Chances are your organization is going to keep coming back to the platform user for many use cases and purposes. Therefore, you need a platform that's flexible and adaptable. So once you've created the business case and it's been implemented and it's successful and everybody's happy, the next thing is really to evangelize it. So evangelize your success. And sharing success in an organization is really important, and this can really help you drive other cloud initiatives in your organization. So some of the ways that we've seen customers do this are as follows. So publish an internal case study to your intranet. You can run demo days where you set up a stall and you demonstrate your product or solution, talk about the benefits and the value of cloud. You can also create interest groups and mailing lists. And finally, if you like, and we definitely encourage you to do this, is to contact AWS about doing a public case study. We have both written and video case studies available on our website. So those are the 7 sort of steps to get you into a grassroots adoption of cloud computing. So you've done all those things and you've had a successful series of POCs and production implementations. What are the next steps? So there's 3 things here that I want to talk about. The first is networking. So most organizations will have some level of networking in place today that connects their offices to data centers. And with AWS, it's really no different. You can connect your offices and data centers to AWS data centers as well. And so we have a service called AWS Direct Connect, where you can run a lease line into a peering point that connects you to our data center infrastructure. The second thing is you want to set up your AWS Virtual Private Cloud. And this is a software-defined network. It allows you to create the boundaries of your network and logically extend your data center into the cloud. So you can create new subnets, you can create firewall rules, you can create routing policies and subnet access control lists, and really allow the company to run in a hybrid IT operating model. So you can have workloads in the cloud and you can have workloads in your data center, and they can both communicate. So networking is the first thing. The next thing that we see customers doing is that they're layering in AWS Enterprise support. So enterprise support is tailored to enterprise customers, and it gives you a number of advantages. The SLA, as an example, is 24/7. Critical response time is less than 15 minutes. And there's a suite of services that sit around that. So there's services like the technical account manager, who is assigned to your account, and they're responsible for optimizing your usage of cloud. And there's a whole bunch of other things. And if you're really interested in this area, I'd encourage you to go to our website, aws.amazon.com/support, to understand more, or also reach out to your account manager. The next thing, once you've got support packaged up, is to look at the security side of things again. And this is a little bit different. So this is where you need to integrate your access management systems with AWS. So AWS supports this ability for you to federate your directory, that is the thing that you log into every day, with the AWS Management Console. So this means that your users can use one username to access their desktop or their administration environments as they can to access the AWS resources. So it gives you a single point of control, and it integrates to your corporate directory, such as Active Directory. So doing the identity and access management integration is a really important step. Once you've got these 3 components installed, you're then ready to start moving more and more applications into the cloud. Okay, so how can AWS help you on your journey? So what I've done here is just talked about, I guess, AWS in the sense of a plan, build, and run model. So in the planning phase, we've got a bunch of services, and I haven't actually put them all into this slide. I've just talked about a few of the relevant ones. So when you're planning, and particularly when you're starting the first of the 7 steps, you can talk to our AWS Solution Architect team. So Solution Architect teams are free consultants. They're there to guide you in terms of best practices around workloads for your organization and how to architect those workloads so you can reduce your cost and improve your availability and scalability in a cloud environment. So we're there to help you perform proof of concepts and support them from an advisory and consulting perspective. We also have a number of people that can help you, if necessary, do total cost of ownership and ROI type exercises. And again, we have a number of resources on our website that are free to download, whether it's storage cost analysis or comparing on-premise server costs versus costs in the cloud. We also bring to bear a number of industry and solution subject matter experts, and these can be accessible through our sales organization. So through an account manager, you can register inquiries through our website. And of course, we have the professional services teams who can work through jumpstart packages and cloud adoption frameworks. The other important one I'll talk about as well is I talked about educating stakeholders earlier in the piece. The solution architects, we actually have security solution architects who can run workshops around security in your organization and brief risk and compliance and security personnel. So again, do reach out to your account manager or our sales team for more information about that. As we move into the build phase, there's a number of things. There's of course the Amazon Partner Network. So we're partnered with some of the largest GSIs in the world and system integrators. There's a full repository and catalog of those on our website, and they can really help you accelerate both proof of concepts and production deployments. And we're also there to provide you with ongoing architecture and cost optimization guidance. There's professional training, which I talked about, and the training schedules are available on our website. Plus, of course, sales support from an account management perspective, and where necessary, enterprise agreements and such. Finally, from a run perspective, and this is really important, so we've got AWS Premium Support. They're there to provide support to you 24/7. It's phone, email support, and chat. And they have a bunch of other services that sit around the enterprise support package. And some of these include the technical account management, which I talked about. There's a concierge service desk that can help your procurement teams and your corporate finance teams with billing inquiries, among many other things. So we have a range of services that can really help your organization go through this journey. And if you have any questions about this, please do reach out to us. Do reach out to your solution architect or your account manager. So let's just recap quickly what we talked about today. So you want to start a grassroots initiative in your organization to adopt cloud. Here are the 7 steps again. So number 1, become the cloud champion in your organization. The second thing is shortlist some business and cloud high-value use cases. And we talked about some of the high-value use cases today, like digital applications. 3, you want to engage InfoSec really early on, those use cases, and compliance if that's a requirement. 4, you want to begin educating stakeholders early, and then as you reach the project initiation phase, move into skill development. So move into technical training where you feel it's necessary. The 5th step is to start a cross-functional cloud enablement team. This will help you really drive outcomes faster and align all the stakeholders in your organization. Next, execute the POC and, of course, capture lessons learned as you go. And finally, you want to write the business case. After the successful implementation, go out there and evangelize it with your audiences. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up and encourage you to continue pushing any questions you have into the chat room, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. And again, if you have any feedback on today's session, it is a new session. We're very interested in your feedback. We want to know if it was useful content. Please do provide us with that feedback if you don't mind. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks.